A house has always been a mechanism to make money, and I had no desire to buy an apartment, which was where I like living in apartments, but they're terrible investments. So I rented for $500 a week an apartment in the city, Christchurch, and I bought as much of the investment properties as the bank would let me.
Welcome to Slice, Property Made Possible. We're a platform on a mission to reduce barriers to home ownership. This podcast is a safe space for our community to learn together and build the confidence required to start on their property journey. When you're ready to start, head along to slicetobuy.com and sign up for your free dashboard.
Awesome. Hi and Mai, welcome back to another episode of Slice, your property podcast. Today we are joined by Nicol, and I don't know how you say your company's name. Is it
OPES Partners.
OPES, okay, so that OPES.
Yeah. I did. It was lesson for what?
Fishing. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today, Andrew. And we like to start off our episodes with a question about your first home journey. What can you remember about that first property purchase?
So I bought my first house to live in 3 years ago. I have only ever rented and owned rental properties up until 3 years ago, and I bought my first and only owner-occupied property and moved into it. And it's probably not a regular owner of our first home, and have been renovating it extensively. But the first property I ever purchased was number 20 Clune Street in Christchurch in Phillipstown, rough part of Christchurch at that stage, and it's lower socio-economic. I paid $230,000. I had a 5% deposit, and some other money was put in by my girlfriend at the time, and we bought that property, renovated that, and flipped it. And that was the start of my property investment journey, which started 20 years ago.
So it's more like investment first home later.
Yeah. Is it? Well, for me, a house has always been a mechanism to make money, and I had no desire to buy an apartment, which was where I like living in apartments, but they're terrible investments. So I rented for $500 a week an apartment in the city, Christchurch, and I bought as much of the investment properties as the bank would let me.
Yeah, as much as you can take in terms of leaving.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the whole benefit of property, right? And it is kind of how New Zealand and our economies get, but the ability to kind of borrow to invest and the leverage that provides you.
Yeah, well, the fact that you can take someone else's money, invest it, have tenants paying you rent that you then pay the bank back with it, and yet you've got to top it up, particularly with high interest rates now. But the fact that I keep all the profits from that, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. Great kind of different perspective that you're bringing. And in terms of kind of that first purchase, what did you think was important?
So, because I'd never bought a property before, it was quite nerve-wracking. So first house is always the hardest one. And I wanted a house that I could add value to, because I was thinking of it as an investment.
And what is your strategy? And we'll go into some of those.
So my strategy then was, very, very basic. I just wanted to be able to do things like paint or recarpet, just the stuff that was easy enough for me to. I didn't recarpet that one that I had to before, so we sent those off and finished them, and we painted all the rooms. I thought feature walls were a good idea 20 years ago, and so I made each room have a feature wall, a different colour.
Fun.
Horrendous. And I actually, the thing about that property that I liked was that it was a kind of a distressed seller situation. So the seller wanted way too much rooms for me to afford. They were going through a separation. They couldn't find a buyer at that price, and I ended up negotiating about $50,000 under what they originally wanted. So I started off with a reasonably decent purchase price. Like $250,000 was reasonable money, but it was still cheap enough that I could afford the mortgage if I didn't have a tenant.
Yeah, and I guess it's a different strategy that you might have today potentially. So how many properties are in your portfolio, or perhaps have been in your portfolio when it's been its largest? So
I did some trading for a while. So I was involved with a syndicate where we would buy properties, renovate them and sell them, just back before Brightline. And we earthquake strengthen them, because I was based in Christchurch. I maybe was involved in 100 or so transactions then. I currently own someone between 30 and 40. I'm not sure I could settle one last week.
Yeah, just Can't even keep track now.
I consolidated a lot because of the interest deductibility rules. So I've been selling down all of my old stock and then signing up for new builds, waiting for those to complete. And so just when Code of Compliance comes out, I said, well, look, so it's been hard to keep up over the last 18 months because of those changes.
Yeah, but now someone that's going to be undone. So we're sort of seeing in real time how those policies can practically make a difference to the buyers in the market.
Yeah, I mean, it was time to shed some of my old stock as well. So the problem with buying an earthquake damaged house and then repairing it is that they're heavy in maintenance. And so from a cash flow perspective, I might pay $10,000 a year in maintenance for just one property. It's pretty expensive. Numbers are up there.
Yeah, totally. And when it comes to kind of the EQC down in Christchurch as well, how do you navigate that? Because I know that can be a bit of a challenge.
I was unlucky enough to have very little damage across my portfolio at that stage. I had a 100-year-old house that I wanted to fall down, because if it had fallen down, I would have got on the insurance paid and rebuilt it. So I considered myself unlucky with that. I had strong insurance policies on all of my houses. I use a broker. So because of that, they kind of took care of everything for me. I didn't find EQC, they were painfully slow to deal with, but they weren't difficult to deal with. I know that some people have been less fortunate with that, with having issues like they might have had a house in the hill, I'd be underinsured. I think we're all a lot wiser now because of everything that everyone's been through with the insurance side of things. So my house, at the moment, my own house, I got a on-site surveyor to come and price it up to actually rebuild, because that's more than what I paid for it. So you need to be sensible with those type of insurance. So I think EQC, nowadays, they're pretty easy to deal with because there's far less claims going through, right? So if you buy a property and there is damage that hasn't been picked up or hasn't been remedied, and you want to reopen that claim up further, that's relatively easy, but I haven't had the exposure on that.
You brought up a great point around insurance and really that being kind of your main kind of tool to manage that. So if you're a first home buyer, you should sort of be looking at EQC as sort of something to consider within your insurance agreement and get that quote before you're actually purchasing.
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea to start maybe not just go with the cheapest option, but make sure that you've got an appropriate policy to cover you if something goes wrong, and those difference between having a sum insured or an actual replacement policy, it makes a big difference.
And something like COVID as well, where you're not getting building materials in the same, then, the cost to rebuild also changes drastically. So potentially what was fit for purpose a year ago isn't now. We had a great episode with Leah recently and CEO of Tower, and we spoke about kind of that under-insuring or over-insuring, and he recommended that actually you just kind of try to reduce the monthly repayments, the premium, by actually not using the insurance unless you kind of absolutely need it, and then increasing the price that you'd have to pay should you, need to use that insurance.
So changing your excess?
Yeah, changing your excess. Yeah, and just making that more expensive, and then you can kind of, if you're to overcover and undercover it.
Yeah, they'd like that.
Yeah,
well, they're not necessarily going to pay you up more money.
Yes, that's true. But yeah, and you mentioned there before that you really started kind of moving into new builds as well, and that's a big part of kind of your strategy in your portfolio. And you also sort of leaned in there around interest rate deductibility and being able to kind of write that off, and that not for a time under labour being an option, but it's different for new builds, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that strategy?
Yeah, so my business is selfishly built on my strategies for investing, which changed a number of years ago. So I was a very active investor, so I'd buy something, I'd renovate it, I'd rent it out, then I'd just repeat the process. That requires quite a lot of time, and then I wanted to help people get into property investment, but that's not really a suitable investment process for lots of people. But most of the investors that I work with, they just want something they can set and forget. Now, it's slower to make money that way because you've got to wait for the market. You're not adding instant equity, but it works. And so I was buying more new builds personally at that stage. There wasn't any extra incentive other than maybe lower vacancy, lower maintenance. There was no government incentives at that stage. Nowadays, you can do it with half the deposit virtually. There's the tax differences, and they'll be here for a while still. And then you add on the fact that the banks will introduce debt to income ratios next year. So those limiting factors mean that it makes more sense from a return on investment standpoint. And again, there's just an easy way of investing. You buy a property, you rent it out, you hold on to it. And the only other strategy that works now is buying and renovating a lot, because you've got to combat those higher interest rates and the lack of interest deductibility at the moment. So basically pay tax on your turnover rather than your profit. That's kind of how I think about it. And, it makes your effective interest rate, rather than be 7%, it makes it kind of 12% at the moment. So it's pretty punishing if you're buying an existing property or you've got existing properties in your portfolio.
Yeah. Although I'm saying that if you're kind of owner-occupier and wanting to live in the property yourself, then potentially that suits your circumstances.
Absolutely.
But yeah, with the new build piece, it's interesting to see kind of how that's being supported. And it makes sense, right? Because essentially we're trying to encourage supply and reduce the supply issue, which is what makes house prices so expensive. And
yeah, the government needs to know that we've got a housing crisis and it's going to get much, much worse. I think it's going to get really hard for tenants next year. I think that we should be encouraging people to buy new builds, whether it's your owner-occupied or your
water build as well.
Yeah, the challenge is the government doesn't make it easy to sign things off, so there's a lot of compliance red tape. If they made that easier, then all of a sudden you'd hear from more builders building more houses.
Yeah. So there is some sort of things that are really within the government's control, and we do need to kind of see movement in that space. I think on the new build piece as well, we had an interesting episode with Professor Paul Spoonman. He's a demography expert, so he does all of the migration kind of stuff for New Zealand, and it's about 110,000 odd migrants. So that's the net sort of inflow of people to New Zealand. And we are one of the top 3, I believe, he said, desirable countries to move to. And we also mentioned that, and I don't know whether this was data-based or anecdotal, but that a lot of those migrants do kind of prefer the new build. And so what might that, one can assume what impact might that have on the new build market as well?
Well, I think that Auckland's going to feel a real tightening of rentals, because people are, particularly if the bright line gets shortened, I think it will, there will be investors that have been holding on to properties that will then get rid of them. And then all of a sudden, that's another property that's out of the market. Couple that with the fact that, say, you had another 100,000 people come into the country. Let's say that 50% of them end up being bought on, which is probably about right. And let's say that represents another, say, 20,000 households. You've got to house them somewhere, and that's going to push rates up. That plus landlords are suffering at the moment with high interest rates.
And they will pass that on.
And they will pass it on. You're running a business. You either sell the property because it doesn't make it sense as an asset anymore, or you increase your turnover by increasing your rent. And I know for any first-time buyers out there listening to this, they might be suffering with higher rates at the moment and feeling like landlords are just being greedy. But that is just the nature of running a business.
Yeah, it's just a lagging factor, right? Interest rates increase, the cost to service your mortgage increases, so you'll increase the rent to cover that mortgage.
Yeah, and I think the thing to remember is most investors out there, they own one property or 2 properties. Statistically, that's 95% of investors, 1 or 2 properties. And they're not rich fat cats on yachts smoking cigars with, expensive bottles of champagne.
They're mums and dads.
So the property that I just settled on Monday this week, I will top up the rent more than, I will top up that property more than the tenant bill. My contributions will be higher.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when you're thinking about that as well, it's, that's not always sustainable.
No, I mean,
from modern landlords, certainly not sustainable.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, so the rent will be $650 a week. I think my top up will be about $750.
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. So you're giving back, Andrew. That's sad.
Andrew, look, I'm generous to a fault.
I don't know if we'll go that far, but in terms of those strategies, because we touched on a couple there, one being kind of the new build strategy, set and forget, the other being kind of, I guess, the renovation strategy. Also kind of paying down the mortgage. That's sort of another way to, I guess, build that equity. What's your thoughts on that as a strategy?
So most investors will have an interest-only mortgage because, particularly with rates right now, there is negative cash flow. And so, again, I don't want to pay $750 contribution and then pay down principal. It just doesn't make sense. But if you're a first-time buyer or an owner-occupier, you absolutely should pay down as much mortgage as you can, as aggressively as possible. So using things like a revolving credit facility. And in our wealth plan, we talk about getting ahead and you get your first run on the ladder, and then you pay down your debt as aggressively as possible, increase your equity however you can, and then you repeat the process, and that's how you get ahead. For investors, it will be a while before their properties will be cash flow positive enough to pay down debt. And then it comes down to, okay, do I want to use my surplus cash to pay down debt, or do I want to use that surplus cash to reinvest? So for me, I reinvest. For a lot of investors, you pay down debt because they just want 1 or 2 properties, and that's fine.
Yeah, and that's manageable for them as well. And I think, you touched on a really good point there around kind of adding value through sort of renovating, but also potentially paying down the debt. Are there other kind of strategies that can support with that capital gains approach?
No, that's kind of adding value. Sometimes you can buy under value. So like that property where I was buying off a couple that were getting divorced, I was able to negotiate a deal that was under market value because of that. Those are harder to find, but sometimes, a private sale or something like that. So I know a lot of first-time buyer stuff work with, I was in finance previously, they might have parents that have properties and they might buy a property under value off their parents. So if you've got rich mum and dad and property investor parents, then maybe you might be able to get a deal off them.
Yeah, that's a good shout out. And I think the other pieces around kind of, as you said, it's actually understanding the circumstances of the seller. So if you can work that out and you can actually work out what you might be able to get a good deal for, or maybe it is by negotiation or putting in an offer before you're actually going to option, so you're avoiding some of that competition.
Yeah, definitely.
And in terms of revolving credit as well, because you brought that up, just wanted to quickly kind of break that down for the audience. We do speak about it in season 1 and episode that, but it is a bit more complex. So essentially, there's a credit facility where you can have access to the funds still. I don't know if I'm going to do this justice.
So there's 2 kind of facilities like this that will reduce your interest bill. There's the offset facility and a revolving credit. Now, an offset, let's say you've got a mortgage of $100,000 on float, so $100,000, and then you've got $30,000 in the bank. The bank will calculate your net position, so $70,000 OD, and they'll charge you interest on the $70,000 rather than the $100,000, while that $30,000 is in the bank. So it reduces your interest every day. A revolving credit is like a big overdraft facility. So it's on home loan interest rates, but it's like an overdraft. And so you might be negative $100,000 today, then you've got $30,000 comes in because you sold a car. That reduces your balance to negative 70 and you pay interest on that. So there's
similar facilities that, sort of slight kind of nuance.
Yeah, and the beauty of either of those is your extra cash that you've paid onto the mortgage is liquid. So with an offset, it's in your account, like a savings account. With a revolving credit, it's in that particular facility, but you've got an available balance of $30,000. So what this can allow people to do is be really aggressive with paying down their mortgage, knowing that if they stretch themselves too far, they've still got that money to go back to. You just want to...
Yeah, so it's encouraging you kind of to do some of those right behaviours.
Yeah, correct. You just want to make sure that you don't get tempted. So some people are no good with revolving credit because as soon as they see the money available, they go buy a jet ski.
Yeah, and that's a money stick as well. There's nothing valuable about a jet ski.
No, I lost significant money on one.
Oh, I can imagine you on a jet ski.
I bought one, I used it twice, and I sold it from...
So don't buy a jet ski. That's the outcome of that sort of skill. But I think, it's really interesting when you think about that as well, because it's actually, people might be like, I don't have 30,000 to put into that facility, but actually you can just put your salary in when it comes in each month for out of with it. Awesome. And in terms of, I guess, the property journey, you've obviously got a lot of experience now, but looking back, what do you wish you knew sort of at the beginning of your journey?
I regret not buying in Auckland sooner because I'm from Christchurch. House prices are cheap there compared to here. And so when I started investing in a property in Christchurch, might have been $230,000. Here it would have been $350,000, which seemed terrifying at that stage. Yeah, they were much more expensive. And Auckland will always be expensive. So I just wish that maybe I'd got my head around the fact that it's just a highly desirable place where there's job opportunities. People want to move here. And you always have a tendency to always have someone buy property. If I'd spent half of my time buying in Auckland, they'd be a lot richer.
Yeah, and I think that's, comes back to that story around actually desirable as a set and migrants coming in, and the majority of New Zealanders actually living in Auckland, so it's just demand and supply. And what other kind of advice might you have for first-time buyers that are, this is their first property purchase, everything's a bit daunting and overwhelming?
It's terrifying. I remember the agonising time of negotiating my first property purchase, and this was one that didn't go ahead. It was property in Cashel Street. The agent saw me coming a mile away because I was so green, and I remember, like looking back now, all those tactics have been used to push my price up, and then eventually got to I walked away from the deal. I would say go and make an offer on something. Don't be afraid to make an offer on something, because once you get that out in the system, it's a lot easier the second time. Now, obviously, get some legal advice and make sure you've got a due diligence clause so you can cancel the contract if it's not right for you. But the best thing you can do is take control of the situation and get a property under contract. Too many first-time buyers, I think, get really nervous about it and try and do all their due diligence first, and then someone else goes and buys the property, and then they have to start again. It can be disheartening. So if you get that property under contract, subject to due diligence, and then work through those things, that can make it a lot less stressful.
Yeah, move quick and kind of try and, again, shake off the competition by putting an offer in, after the first open home, or when you see it pop up online. And we do support with that. We have the due diligence checklist that steps our customers through it at slicespy.com, and we do have OPES Partners offering that productized legal advice. And I think that is, to your point, you also don't need to necessarily pay for that upfront or do all of that due diligence upfront. If you actually just make an offer and get at that negotiation table, then you can go from there. And in terms of horror stories, have you experienced any yourself, Andrew, or are there any really bangers that you've got to share?
I made the mistake when I was starting out investing in property, managing my own properties. Yeah, I'm very good at my job. I'm not very good at someone else's job. They are the manager, it turns out. And I had this one property, which I rented out to this couple, and they seemed nice enough, big family. They moved into the house, and week number 1, she rang me, and she'd seen the spider. And she was terrified, and the house spider-proof. And I was like early 20s at this stage, and I think there was this perception that I was rich because I owned a house and they did it. I was mortgaged to the eyeballs. I'm still mortgaged to the eyeballs. Yeah, it's all debt. And anyway, I felt bad for this lady, so I paid for a spider-proofing in the house, $500, like a whole week's worth of rent. And then the next week she rang up and there was something else. And this is a house, and something else, and something else. And in the end, I was like, I'm sick of this woman, so I just stopped replying to it. And so she stopped paying the rent, and we ended up having to go to the tenancy tribunal. Now, at that stage, like the relationship had just broken down. I should have just let professionals do it, do their job and be in between. But I was trying to save my $20 a week by managing it myself. Anyway, they ended up just abandoning the house, leaving a whole bunch of stuff there, and owing me about $5,000. And so the tenancy tribunal ordered in my favour. I had some bond, I got some of that money back, and then they wanted their stuff. Now, I couldn't get an order to take money in their pay because I didn't have their address. So I bundled up all their stuff, and I went online and I ordered a little GPS tracker. And then I found an old DVD player in the garage, and I unscrewed it, and I put this GPS tracker in there. House. And anyway, I got them served with this order, and they were ordered to pay me back, and then they skipped town and went to Australia. I lost my money.
Oh, wow. Still, I've kind of like the Kiwi ingenuity if it's safe with that.
Yeah. And this is back before you could just go and buy a tile or an air tech. This is 15 years ago. And so I guess my lesson there, you always want to use professionals, whether it's your lawyer or an accountant or property manager. Whatever you're doing in property, you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of dollars, so you don't want to get it wrong because it will cost you a lot more. And that cost me $5,000 if I'd used a property manager, probably 3 years worth of the property management fee. So just don't try and do everything yourself. And we're in such an information age that you can get a little bit of knowledge on the internet, and that can be quite dangerous if you think you're an expert.
Yes, and you're getting all of that information, and it's actually overwhelming, and you're picking up the wrong things. And there's also a lot of misinformation as well.
Don't get advice from your friends.
Yeah. Or just, random kind of people online talking about stuff that don't have experience in property or law or finance.
Yeah. We actually did a podcast the other day, which was the things that you'll hear from Uncle Lester, we call him, at the barbecue, because we all know you've got an uncle or someone's friend, and they're an expert at everything to do with property because they read the Herald, and then all of a sudden, they'll put you off buying in a particular suburb because they read something about, a Meg works there or something, and all of a sudden it just becomes overwhelming, and we make poor decisions because of gossip.
Yeah, so build the right team around you, and I think also you're talking about, the agent and then sort of trying to biz you up and using those tactics. don't think that the agent is one of your team members, because they're not.
No, they work for the seller and they've got an obligation to get their seller the most amount of money. That's who pays them.
And not only an obligation, but it's beneficial to them that they sell that for as much as possible, because they get sort of a percentage back. So that's a really interesting one that we have with a lot of our first home buyers, sort of saying, oh, well, the agent said X, Y, Z, and I think they seem all right. And I'm like, we'll never assume. And always, do get the right team around you, brokers, lawyers in the space. In terms of developers, speaking of partners, I know you guys work with them. What are you sort of seeing in terms of development trends? Because we are kind of seeing that shift towards co-ownership into generational homes. Are they kind of exploring different types of buildings and what might be fit for the future?
So in Christchurch and a little bit here in Auckland, there are a lot more, we call them home and income previously, where you'd have a unit attached to a house, a separate dwelling, or like an attached dwelling but self-contained. And the whole idea of that is that you can live in it and then rent that part out, or you can have intergenerational ownership. I think there's a bit more of that. I don't think there's a lot more, but I am seeing it happen a little bit. In terms of the change in developers' mentalities, I think the biggest developers just stick to doing the stuff for the masses. So when you look at what's around here in Auckland, there's a lot of 2 and 3 bedroom townhouses and just lots of them. I think that any developer of any scale will always kind of focus on that, because it meets the masses for the market.
And they can rinse, repeat with what they're building as well.
Absolutely. I think that what we're going to see with developers over the next 5 months is a lot of blood on the floor. So if you think back to the GFC, in the painful years, that's when developers were able to hang on, because there was still lots of work in progress. The pain's yet to come in the development space. So I think you'll see a lot of them go bankrupt next year. Oh, sorry, not a lot of them. I think you'll see a significant and some big names go broke next year. So if you're a first-time buyer or an investor, you're buying off lands, you really want to know that the person you're buying from can deliver, number one. But number two, that your money's protected, because, again, previously we had companies like called Blue Chip, and they took a lot of people's deposits, because deposits were being paid to them rather than being held in the worst trust.
I learned that I was at a lunch yesterday talking about Blue Chip.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought you'd be too young to know who they were.
Oh, well, I guess I learned about them.
Yeah. So, yeah, they were grubby. And
it's like a big Ponzi scheme. That's what their system sounded like.
There are some developers here in Auckland that I think are running similar type of operations. They're taking money from investors or buyers, and they're using that to fund a project. I'm against that. I would always make sure that your money, if you're buying lands, is sitting in a lawyer's trust account.
Yeah, so just making sure that, again, you're getting the right legal support when you are buying up the plans, because the clauses in some of those, they change by developer as well. So you don't know exactly what you're going to get. It's not sort of a one size fits all.
And so, yeah, I think you'll see some change to the types of properties, but I don't think a lot over the next few years, because it's still going to be hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the best thing you do is just make sacrifices now when you're young, so that you don't have to sacrifice later on in life, because life's too short to work for all of it. My dad died a couple of years ago, 65. He retired in June. In August, he dropped a heart attack. He didn't stop working, and it was a real wake-up call for me that life's really, really short, and can be even shorter than statistically we think it is. And life's too short not to live the hell out of it. So you want to make sure that you are getting on the housing. If housing's important to you and investing is important to you, just do it as soon as you possibly can, so that you can retire as soon as you can.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about that as well. It's hard, but I guess you learn from kind of the lessons from your parents as well. And in terms of co-ownership as well, that's also obviously an opportunity to get in sooner. You mentioned you bought your first time a partner at the time.
Yeah.
How did you guys manage that?
So I did with properties with most of my partners. So Alice and I were, I think she was 18 and I was 19. We'd been up for the weekend and decided we'd get into the investment, because we might have seen something or read something. And we decided we just do it together. And so she had a smaller deposit than mine. We put it together. We wrote an agreement, just as in a appin or something, which is how I do most of my agreements, that in the event of a separation or when we sell a property, we'd take our money back that we'd put in, and we'd divide the profits 50-50. And that's what we did. We bought the property that we could renovate, and what we would do is every day after work, with the Koreans at the time she worked for her parents' business, we'd go to the house, we'd do renovations till about midnight, then we'd go home and we'd do the process. And this was while the people were living there, going through their separation. So some tense times, and we did that for a couple of months. And then when we settled it was already fully renovated, I think we stayed there that night, and then we rented out the next day.
Cool. Yeah, so it just goes to show, you were sort of thinking about it as an investment from that very first purchase. And in terms of, I guess, you've said there's other partners that you've purchased with. Have you had any challenges when it has come to selling that property or potentially that relationship ending?
No, because we were always very well prepared in terms of what the agreement was. So that's really important when you buy with anyone, a partner, a business partner, a friend. You have expectations and you outline everything. What if something goes wrong? And this is going to be your most unromantic conversation with your partner you're about to buy a house with. What do we do when we break up? Because statistically you're going to. So you just need to outline these things. And then you get the benefit of double income and double deposit and stuff like that. So you shouldn't be afraid to invest with someone else. And if it does break down, then you just treat each other respectfully and divvy up the money.
Yeah, and I think that's, a big part of what our platform does as well is around those legal agreements. But it's not just actually having the agreement. As you said, it's the expectations, like setting those expectations up front. And whilst perhaps it's not romantic, I think, it's a really healthy place to take your relationship, though, to actually be able to have those financial conversations and set shared expectations before a big life decision.
That's right. Well, courts are these romantic, so likely conversation ending up in court is not that fun either.
And more expensive as well.
Yeah.
Cool. And in terms of purchasing property then, have you actually, are there many properties that you bought as an individual, or actually did you buy a lot of them with other people?
I would say it's probably 50-50.
Yeah.
Yeah, 50-50. I did a lot of earthquake damage properties. That's a lot of earthquake damage properties with a couple of old business partners. That was a lot of the trading side of things. For a big chunk of my portfolio, it was just by myself.
Awesome. And obviously that's kind of an opportunity that can come later for me as well. Like you start with co-ownership, investing then.
Yeah, that's right. And it's definitely transitioned into that because, again, previously when we were doing the more active strategy, I didn't have any time because I was growing a business. So one of my friends, he got involved and he had more time than the other two partners, me and my other partner. So he would go and project manage any renovations and things like that. So again, we just had clear division of labour of who's going to do what. So I handled the finances. One I don't know if he did, but that would go around and actually do the inspections and make sure it is on track.
Yeah. So sharing those responsibilities, like whomever it is that you're buying.
Yeah, because the problem with partnerships is eventually someone might think that they're putting in more work or more money or something else that the other person is not, and that's where you can have an issue.
Yeah, it can actually be time and energy, not just like your financial contribution. And in terms of where you're going with your investments now, obviously it's looking like the market is going to lift and we're kind of heading in a certain direction. Do you have any kind of goals or plans for your property portfolio going forward?
Yeah, I want to buy more of it now. So I've got about 3 or 4 properties under construction here at the moment, and that I'll settle on in the next 12 months. Then I'll put more deposits down. I just want to grow my optimum portfolio.
Yeah. And because you kind of have a big portfolio, does that mean that you can put up a different amount when it comes to kind of deposit?
Banks are pretty mean to me. So my latest loan, I had to put in 30% cash deposit, and I pay a 11% interest rate because 9% interest rate, but then I had to pay an application fee of 2% as well. So the first year it cost me 11% because I'm a commercial client, so it's expensive for me.
Yeah, so there are actually kind of considerations as to whether you are a first-time buyer or an investor. So it's not as easy as it said and discard at the end. But it is a good thing, to be honest, because you do want to kind of encourage and enable those that are coming in the first time and kind of make it a fairer system. Has the national government coming in, has that influenced your decision-making or your plans at all?
The dirty dark secret of politics for me is that I make a lot of money into a Labour government, so I'm quite happy with either government. And like, honestly, so the country being in a good place is what really matters to me more than the amount of tax I pay. I pay my fair share of tax, and as long as it's being spent well, then I don't really mind who's in charge. I do think it's time for a change. I think we need to get inflation under control so we can get back to bigger interest rates. And I think National ought to do that. So I think it's positive, but it won't change the way I invest. I'll keep on doing it because I'm investing for another 20 years. So there will be blue governments and there'll be red governments.
And if you have that long-term strategy in mind, it doesn't matter the same.
No difference.
Yeah. And have you kind of, when you're selling though as well, selling properties and kind of carving those off, is there a particular kind of time or period where you do seek to do that, to flip kind of?
I wouldn't sell anything under Brightline, which is now 10 years if it's an existing property, 5 that's a new property.
And going to reduce?
It will reduce. So I would not, I just would hold something longer. The only property I've sold in the last 12 months is one that I owed with my mum and my dad, and my mum needed to realise some cash out to fund her lifestyle. Now she's got the one income, but other than that, I have no need to sell anything anytime soon now.
Yeah. So it's really how that long-term strategy, but it's also interesting to know that the Brightline and some policies do kind of impact the way that people are behaving in the market.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We've got one last question for you, which is, if your house, so let's say the owner-occupier one, the one that you're living in now, had a doorbell and that doorbell played a theme song, what would be playing?
Probably Ain't No Rest for the Wicked.
Hustle culture. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining our community. Buying property isn't easy, but listening in will get you one step closer on your journey. Please leave an Apple or Spotify review and provide feedback so we can improve your experience. Join our Facebook group, A Safe Space to Learn Together, or follow us on Instagram at @slicetobuy. If you have any questions or topics you would like us to touch on, you can email us at hello@slicetobuy.com. A quick reminder, Slice the podcast does not provide personalised investment advice. We are not acting as financial advisors or taking into account your circumstances. To get personalised advice, join us at slicetobuy.com and engage with our partners who can act as your financial advisor or lawyer and support you with your specific needs.